Welcome back to the channel. It is good to have you here with me again. Today, I am going to tell you about something I found on Solstheim. Something that should not exist. A temple that stands whole when it should be ruins. A tomb that holds a hero when it should hold a traitor. A timeline where the First Dragonborn made a different choice, and that choice rewrote everything we thought we knew about corruption and power and what it means to be Dragonborn. The First Dragonborn's greatest power was the choice he never made to serve darkness. But what if heroism was simply the absence of corruption, and corruption was always waiting? What if Miraak resisted the Black Books, joined the ancient heroes to defeat Alduin, and became the greatest champion Skyrim ever knew? And what if that changed nothing? What if his resistance only proved that even the strongest, most virtuous Dragonborn cannot escape the hunger that lives in dragon souls, the slow transformation from hero to tyrant that no amount of willpower can prevent? This is the story of that timeline. This is the confession of what I found there. And if you genuinely enjoy this kind of dark storytelling, consider subscribing and liking the channel, but only if it truly resonates with you. I stand where history broke. The stones beneath my boots are wrong. They should be ash and ruin, scattered by the rage of dragons who razed this temple to its foundation. But these flagstones are whole, unmarked by dragonfire, because in this timeline, in this fractured possibility, the Temple of Miraak never became a monument to betrayal. It never needed to burn. My hands shake as I trace the carved inscriptions on the walls. They tell a different story than the one you know. These carvings do not whisper of treachery. They do not speak the name of the traitor. Instead, they sing praise to the first hero, the Dragonborn who answered when the world cried out for salvation. I have walked through time itself to stand in this impossible place, and I need you to understand what I have found here, what I have lost by finding it. Solstheim stretches before me, still connected to the mainland. No catastrophic battle tore this island from Skyrim's breast. The land is whole because Valak the Guardian never earned his title. There was no traitor to guard. The man you know as Valak the Jailer lived and died as simply Valak, a dragon priest remembered for his service, not his vigilance against a fallen brother. I have read the altered histories. I have touched the stones that remember differently. And I have come to understand that a single choice, one moment of resistance against corruption, could have rewritten everything. Let me tell you about the moment that never happened. In your timeline, in the world you know, Miraak found a black book. The tome appeared to him as all black books appear, as if fate itself had guided his hand to its pages. Perhaps it had. Hermaeus Mora, the demon of knowledge, the Daedric prince who hoards all secrets in his realm of apocrypha, does not scatter his artifacts by accident. Each black book is a hook, a lure, a carefully baited trap designed to snare those who hunger for power beyond their station. The books are bound in lurker leather, written with seeker ink that takes 10 years to brew, on paper pressed from trees that have never seen the sun. They are beautiful and terrible, and when you open them, tentacles emerge from the pages to pull you into Apocrypha's endless library. Miraak opened the book. In your world, he read its whispered promises. He allowed himself to be pulled into that realm of writhing knowledge, where forbidden truths stack in towers that reach toward a green-tinged sky, where the ground is an endless sea of toxic black oil, where tentacles breach the surface and whisper your name. He made a bargain with Hermaeus Mora. He learned the Bend-Will shout, the Thu'um that could enslave both men and dragons to his will, and with that power coursing through his voice, he turned on his dragon overlords, slaughtering them in numbers that made even Alduin take notice. But that is not what happened here. Here, in this timeline, Miraak felt the book's pull and recognized it for what it was. A chain disguised as a crown, the gift of knowledge that was really the price of servitude. I do not know what gave him the strength to resist. Perhaps he remembered the oaths he had sworn as a dragon priest. Perhaps he glimpsed, in that first moment of temptation, the long and bitter centuries he would spend trapped in Apocrypha, neither dead nor truly alive, a tool for a Daedric prince who collects champions the way a child collects insects. Perhaps he simply possessed a sliver of wisdom that the Miraak of your timeline lacked. He closed the book, he refused the bargain, and in that refusal, he remained uncorrupted when Hakon One-Eye came calling. I can see it now, as clearly as if I had been there. The messenger arrives at Miraak's temple on Solstheim, bearing urgent word from the heroes of the rebellion. The Dragon War has reached its terrible crescendo. Parthenax, Alduin's own lieutenant, has betrayed his brother and taught mankind the Thu'um. The ancient Nords have learned to shout, to wield the voice as a weapon against their dragon oppressors. But even with this power, even with Gormlaith Golden-Hilt's blade-drinking dragon blood, even with Felldir the Old's mastery of words, they cannot defeat Alduin. The World Eater is too strong, too ancient, too steeped in the power of Akatosh himself. They need a Dragonborn. In your timeline, Miraak refused. The histories record his words, cold and contemptuous. He told them he would forge his own path. He told them to fight their own battles. He abandoned them to face Alduin without him, turning instead to his own mad rebellion, his own doomed attempt to overthrow the dragons through Hermaeus Mora's corrupted gifts. That refusal earned him the title you know well, the traitor, the first servant, the one who chose power over duty. But here, now, in this fractured timeline, Miraak's answer was different. He said, yes, I need you to understand the weight of that choice. Miraak was the first Dragonborn, blessed by Akatosh, with the soul of a dragon trapped in mortal flesh. He possessed the ability to devour dragon souls, to absorb their knowledge of the Thu'um instantly, to kill them permanently in a way that no other being could. When a dragon dies by any other hand, they can be resurrected. Their bones can be called back to life by Alduin's shout. But when a Dragonborn slays a dragon and consumes its soul, that death is final. That dragon is gone from the cycle of time itself. This power terrified the dragons. It should have, but Miraak had kept it hidden, or perhaps had not yet discovered its full potential. The dragons knew him as a dragon priest, powerful and favored, but they did not yet understand what he truly was. When Miraak answered Hakon's call and journeyed to join the rebellion, he brought with him a weapon the dragons had not prepared for. He brought hope. I have stood where they stood, at the summit of the throat of the world. I have felt the wind that howls eternally across that peak, carrying with it the screams of ages. It is a place of power, a wound in the world where reality grows thin. When Gormlaith, Hakon, and Felldir faced Alduin there in your timeline, they barely survived. Gormlaith died in the battle, torn apart by Alduin's jaws before Felldir could use the Elder Scroll. They won by desperation and sacrifice, by casting Alduin forward through time in a move that solved nothing and merely postponed the inevitable. The time wound they created still bleeds at the mountain's peak, a scar in the fabric of existence that allows the last Dragonborn to witness that terrible day. But with Miraak standing beside them, the battle unfolded differently. 4 heroes faced the World Eater instead of 3. 4 voices shouted Dragonrend, that first and most terrible shout ever created solely by mortal minds, the word that forces a dragon to comprehend mortality, to feel the crushing weight of finite existence. Dragonrend is perhaps the cruelest weapon ever devised. Dragons are immortal, ageless, eternal. They do not die of age or disease. They exist outside the normal flow of time, and their minds cannot comprehend the concept of ending. Dragonrend forces that comprehension upon them. It makes them mortal, if only for a moment. It makes them vulnerable. It makes them feel fear. When Alduin crashed to the ground, forced down by the combined power of Dragonrend, shouted by 4 tongues instead of 3, he found himself facing not just brave warriors, but a being whose very existence was his antithesis. Miraak stepped forward, and I imagine Alduin's eyes widening in recognition and rage as he realized what stood before him. A Dragonborn, a creature with the soul of a dragon, capable of devouring his essence, of ending him permanently. The battle was still brutal. Alduin was, is, and always will be the firstborn of Akatosh, the World Eater, the end of all things. Even weakened by Dragonrend, even facing a Dragonborn, he was nearly unstoppable. His fire breath shout turned the snow to steam. His voice alone could call meteor storms from the sky. But Miraak could match him, Dragonborn to dragon, soul against soul. And when Felldir raised the Elder Scroll, when he prepared to cast Alduin forward through time as a last desperate measure, Miraak was there to buy him the seconds he needed. Hakon fought with savage fury. Gormlaith, still alive in this timeline because Miraak had drawn Alduin's attention away from her, struck blow after blow with her golden blade. And Miraak, the first Dragonborn, held Alduin's gaze and his fury while Felldir opened the scroll and spoke the words that would banish the World Eater. But this is where the timelines truly diverge. In your world, the Elder Scroll barely worked. It sent Alduin forward, true, but the banishment was incomplete. The time wound it created was a gaping tear in reality, a permanent scar that bled through the ages. Alduin was displaced, but not destroyed. He would return in the Fourth Era, still powerful, still angry, still the same threat he had always been. The ancient Nords bought time, nothing more. Here, with Miraak's aid, the banishment was more complete. The first Dragonborn's understanding of dragon souls, his intimate knowledge of how to sever a dragon's connection to time itself, allowed him to guide Felldir in using the Elder Scroll with greater precision. They did not merely shunt Alduin forward through time. They wounded him deeply, severed much of his power, sealed the time wound properly so that it became a closed scar rather than an open gateway. Perhaps Alduin never returns at all in this timeline. Perhaps the last Dragonborn never needs to be born. Or perhaps Alduin does come back, but weakened, manageable, no longer the apocalyptic threat he was. I do not know for certain. The timelines blur when I try to see that far forward. But I know that Miraak's presence changed the math of that battle fundamentally, and I know that Miraak survived. This is perhaps the most important change. In your world, Miraak never fought at the throat of the world. He never stood against Alduin. Instead, he fought against his fellow dragon priest, Valok, and barely escaped with his life when Hermaeus Mora pulled him into Apocrypha. He spent thousands of years trapped in that realm, growing more bitter, more twisted, more desperate with each passing century. He became the villain you know, the antagonist who tried to return to Solstheim and enslave its people. But here, Miraak walked down from the throat of the world as a hero. The people celebrated him. The Skal's ancestors sang songs of his valor. The dragons, those that survived the war, looked upon him with fear and respect. He was Dragonborn, yes, but he had used that power in service of humanity rather than in pursuit of dominion. He had answered the call when it came. He had stood against the World Eater himself and lived. Can you imagine what that means for the centuries that followed? Miraak did not disappear into Apocrypha. He did not become a cautionary tale. Instead, he became the template for what a Dragonborn should be. When Saint Alessia was born in the First Era, when she rose up against the Aeliad slave masters and made her covenant with Akatosh, there was already a precedent for how a Dragonborn should serve. The Dragonborn emperors who followed Alessia's heirs and Reman Cyrodiil and eventually Tiber Septim, they all had Miraak's example to guide them. The first Dragonborn had been a hero, a savior, a servant of humanity. Perhaps that changed them. Perhaps the Septim dynasty would have been different, less prone to corruption and tyranny if Tiber Septim had grown up hearing stories of Miraak the hero rather than Miraak the traitor. I cannot know, but I can hope. And the blades. Oh, the blades. In your timeline, the blades were formed to hunt Dragonborn who had fallen to darkness, to serve as a check against the very power they once revered. They were born from paranoia, from the knowledge that a Dragonborn could become a tyrant as easily as a hero. But here, with Miraak as their founding inspiration, rather than their founding warning, the blades formed differently. They became protectors of the Dragonborn, guardians of the sacred duty, an order dedicated to ensuring that each Dragonborn had the support and guidance to resist corruption. What do you think really happened here? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I would like to know if I am the only one who feels this way. They might have prevented so much suffering. If the blades of this timeline had been watching over Tiber Septim, guiding him, helping him resist the temptations of power, would he still have achieved Chim, that terrible enlightenment that let him reshape reality itself? Would he have needed to? Would the Septim line have ended in betrayal and chaos, or would it have endured? I am getting ahead of myself. Let me return to Miraak. After the Dragon War, Miraak settled on Solstheim. His temple was not raised by vengeful dragons, because he had fought with humanity rather than against it. It became a place of pilgrimage, a training ground for those who wished to learn the Thu'um in its purest form. Miraak taught the voice, but he taught it as a tool of protection, not domination. He trained generations of tongues who would go on to defend Skyrim against countless threats. And perhaps most importantly, he never opened another black book. I have searched this temple thoroughly. There are no black books here, no tentacled tomes waiting to pull the unwary into Apocrypha. Hermaeus Mora's influence never took root in this place. Miraak recognized the Poliself. Danger, warned others about it, spoke openly about the temptation he had resisted. He made the nature of Daedric bargains clear to all who would listen. Knowledge, he taught, should be earned through study and experience, not purchased through service to an immortal being with inscrutable motives. This might be the most important legacy he left, an entire culture that understood the price of forbidden knowledge, a Skyrim where the black books were feared rather than coveted, where Hermaeus Mora's gifts were recognized as the traps they truly are. But as I stand here, feeling the weight of this timeline pressing down on me, I cannot escape a terrible question, a doubt that gnaws at me like the tentacles that breach the oily waters of Apocrypha. What if this is wrong? What if Miraak's corruption was never about his weakness, but about his strength? What if every Dragonborn, every single soul, blessed and cursed with the power to devour dragons, is destined to fall? What if the gift is itself the corruption, and Miraak's early surrender to Hermaeus Mora was not a betrayal, but an inevitability made manifest? I think about the last Dragonborn. In your timeline, they defeat Alduin, save the world, and then what? What happens to them? The histories blur. Some say they disappeared. Some say they ruled. Some say they fell to the same temptations that claimed so many before them. And I wonder, I cannot stop wondering, if Miraak's early corruption was a mercy, a warning written early enough to matter, a signpost on a road that all Dragonborn must eventually walk. Because here, in this timeline where Miraak resisted, where he remained pure and heroic and uncorrupted, I have found his tomb, not the prison Hermaeus Mora crafted from madness and forbidden knowledge, not the sunken temple where cultists would one day rebuild monuments to corruption. I have found where Miraak the hero was laid to rest after living a full mortal life, dying of age rather than betrayal, surrounded by those who loved him rather than those who feared him. The crypt is beautiful. It rests beneath the temple, carved from living stone, and the walls are covered with murals depicting his greatest deeds. I see him standing with Gormlaith, Hakon, and Felldir atop the throat of the world. I see him teaching the Thu'um to young Nords who kneel before him with reverence. I see him turning away from a black book wreathed in tentacles, his hand raised in refusal, his face set with determination. But I also see something else, something the artists tried to hide but could not quite erase. In the later murals, the ones depicting Miraak in his final years, there is a shadow behind him. It is subtle, barely visible unless you know to look for it, a mass of eyes and tentacles lurking just beyond the edge of the frame, watching, waiting. Hermaeus Mora never forgot about him. The demon of knowledge does not forgive those who refuse his gifts, and I am beginning to understand that resistance was never enough. That the moment Miraak touched that black book, the moment his fingers brushed across its lurker leather cover, he was marked, claimed, whether he opened it or not. Let me tell you what I have learned from the fragments I have pieced together, from the histories that do not quite align, from the silences that speak louder than words. Miraak lived for decades after the Dragon War. He was celebrated, honored, practically worshipped by the people of Solstheim and mainland Skyrim alike. The First Dragonborn, the Dragon War hero, the man who stood against the World Eater and survived. Children were named after him. His teachings spread throughout the Nordic kingdoms. The way of the voice, which in your timeline becomes a philosophy of restraint and pacifism under the Greybeards, here developed as something different, a warrior's creed, the Thu'um used for protection, yes, but also for righteous combat, for defending the weak, for striking down threats, humanity. It sounds noble. It was noble, for a time. But power does not corrupt instantly. It seeps in slowly, like water through stone, wearing away at the foundations of morality until the entire structure collapses. Miraak remained uncorrupted by Hermaeus Mora. True, he never opened that black book again. He never made a pact with a Daedric prince, but he was still Dragonborn, still possessed the soul of a dragon wearing mortal flesh, and dragon souls are not meant to be contained in such fragile vessels. Dragons are inherently domineering. It is not a choice for them. It is their nature, as fundamental as breathing. They believe, truly and completely, that power equals truth, that the strong have the right to rule the weak. When Paarthurnax turned against Alduin, when he chose to help humanity, he did not stop being a dragon. He simply chose, every single day, to fight against what he was. He described it once to the last Dragonborn. He said that the desire to dominate, to rule, to impose his will on others, never goes away. It gnaws at him constantly. Every moment of restraint is a battle. Miraak had that same dragon soul, that same fundamental nature, warring against his human morality. And unlike Paarthurnax, who isolated himself atop the throat of the world where he could harm no one, Miraak remained among people, people who adored him, people who would do anything he asked, people who saw him as more than a man, who treated him as something approaching divine. Can you imagine the temptation, not the obvious corruption of Hermaeus Mora's whispered promises, but the subtle, insidious corruption of universal love and obedience? When everyone agrees with you, when no one questions your decisions, when your word becomes law simply because you spoke it, how do you remain humble? How do you remember that you are fallible? The answer is, you do not. You cannot. I have found records of Miraak's later years, hidden in the deepest archives of this temple. They are not the sanitized histories carved into his tomb walls. They are the private journals of his students, his advisors, the people who loved him enough to record the truth, even when it hurt. Miraak began to change, slowly, imperceptibly at first. He became more certain of his judgments, less willing to hear dissent. When someone questioned his decisions, he would silence them not with anger, but with a demonstration of power, a shout that would shake the foundations of the temple, a reminder of what he was, what he had done, what he could do again if necessary. He never hurt anyone. He did not need to. The threat was always implicit. His students began to fear disappointing him. They stopped bringing him problems, stopped seeking his counsel on difficult matters, because his answers had become edicts rather than guidance. The way of the voice, his great gift to Skyrim, slowly transformed from a philosophy into a dogma. Those who mastered the Thu'um were expected to follow Miraak's teachings exactly, without deviation, without question. And then the dragons started returning. Not Alduin. He was gone, banished, perhaps destroyed. But there were other dragons, survivors of the Dragon War, who had hidden themselves away, waiting for the storm to pass. Some had fled to distant lands. Others had sealed themselves in barrows, sleeping away the centuries. When they began to wake and return to Skyrim, they found a world much changed. Humanity had won. The dragon cult was broken. The age of dragon dominion was over. Most of these dragons simply wanted to survive. They were tired, broken, mourning their fallen kin. They sought only to find a remote mountain peak where they could live out their endless days in peace. Some even approached humanity cautiously, seeking dialogue, perhaps even cooperation. Miraak killed them all, not immediately, not the first one, or even the second, but as more dragons appeared, as the fear spread among the people who had lived through the Dragon War or heard their parents' stories of it, Miraak took it upon himself to eliminate the threat permanently. He was Dragonborn. It was his purpose, his duty, his destiny to devour dragon souls. Each one he consumed made him stronger, more knowledgeable, more powerful. Each death was celebrated by the people, who saw him as their eternal guardian. But I have read the journals of those who witnessed these hunts. I have seen the descriptions of how Miraak changed when the dragon blood sang in his veins, when he absorbed a soul and felt its knowledge, its power, its memories flowing into him. His eyes would glow, his voice would deepen, taking on the resonance of the dove. He would stand taller, move with predatory grace, and for a moment, just a moment, he was more dragon than man. And each time it became harder for him to return to being simply Miraak, simply human. There is a concept in Nordic philosophy called the dragon's hunger. It describes the insatiable desire of dragons to dominate, to consume, to expand their power and influence without end. Paarthurnax spoke of it as an addiction, a need that could never be truly satisfied. Every victory makes you want another. Every soul you devour leaves you hungry for more. The Dragonborn is supposed to be humanity's weapon against this, a way to permanently end dragons and their threat. But what happens when the weapon itself becomes infected with the same hunger? Miraak began seeking out dragons, not waiting for them to threaten humanity, but hunting them actively. He would range across Skyrim, sometimes for months at a time, tracking down every rumor of dragon sign. His students, his disciples, became his hunting party. They would corner a dragon, weaken it with dragon rend, and then Miraak would deliver the killing blow and consume its soul in front of them. He called it protecting Skyrim. He believed, I think genuinely believed, that he was doing his duty as Dragonborn. But the journals tell a different story. They describe how he would smile during the hunts, how his hands would shake with anticipation before a battle, how he would sometimes pause after devouring a soul, his eyes closed, a look of pure ecstasy on his face that made his companions uncomfortable. One of his students, a woman named Yrsa, wrote this in her final entry before she disappeared. I watched him kill Salognir today. The dragon was old, weak, half mad with loneliness. It tried to surrender. It spoke in broken Nordic, begging for mercy, offering to fly away and never return. Miraak used Dragonrend anyway. He said it was necessary, that dragons cannot be trusted, that their nature makes peace impossible. But I saw his face when Salognir hit the ground. I saw the hunger there, the need, and I realized that he was not describing dragons. He was describing himself. Yrsa was never seen again after that entry. The official story is that she left to pursue her own path, but I have found her name. In another document, a list of those who disappointed the First Dragonborn and chose isolation over service. It is a long list, too long. If you have ever wondered what choice you would make in a situation like this, tell me in the comments. I will be reading them. Miraak's reign, and it was a reign even if no one called it that, lasted for 73 years. He aged as all mortals do, but slowly. The dragon blood in him, the constant consumption of dragon souls, prolonged his life far beyond normal human span. Some whispered that he would live forever, that he had achieved a kind of immortality through his power. Others feared that he had become something neither man nor dragon, something new and potentially more dangerous than either. And Hermaeus Mora watched, always watched, never intervening, never offering, simply observing as Miraak walked the path that all Dragonborn must walk, the razor's edge between heroism and tyranny, between service and dominion. The demon of knowledge did not need to corrupt Miraak directly. The corruption was built into the very nature of what he was. The Black Book had been a shortcut, a way to accelerate the inevitable. But Miraak would arrive at the same destination, eventually, through the simple act of being Dragonborn. I found evidence of this in the deep archives. A Black Book, hidden in a warded chamber, wrapped in chains inscribed with Nordic runes of binding. It is the same book Miraak refused all those decades ago. Still here, still waiting. The seals on the chamber show signs of tampering, of someone entering repeatedly and standing before the book without touching it. Miraak came back here, again and again, throughout his life. He would stand before the black book and stare at it, wrestling with temptation. The same temptation he had resisted at the beginning. But it became harder each time, did it not? Each dragon soul he consumed made him a little more draconic, a little less human. Each year of unchallenged authority made him a little more certain of his righteousness. Each moment of isolation at the pinnacle of power made him a little more lonely, a little more desperate for something, anything that could understand what he had become. The final entry in the temple archives is dated 3 days before Miraak's death. It is in his own hand, shaky with age but still recognizable. It reads, "I have lived as a hero. I have served humanity. I have resisted corruption for 73 years, and I am so very tired. The dragons whisper to me in dreams. The souls I have consumed echo in my mind, speaking the language of domination, of power, of truth through strength. I understand them now in ways I did not when I was young. I understand why Alduin believed he had the right to rule, why the dragons saw humanity as lesser. The power is not the corruption. The power is the truth, and the truth is that some are meant to rule and others are meant to serve. I have fought this, understanding my entire life, but understanding is not the same as accepting, and I am tired of fighting what I am." 3 days later, Miraak died in his sleep. Natural causes, they said, a peaceful end to a heroic life. But I wonder, I stand in his tomb and look at that shadow lurking behind him in the murals, and I wonder if death was truly natural, or if Hermaeus Mora, patient beyond mortal comprehension, finally collected what had always been his. Because here is what terrifies me most about this timeline. Miraak resisted. He refused the Black Book. He never made a pact with a Daedric prince. He served humanity faithfully for over 7 decades. And still, in the end, the corruption found him. Still, he became the thing he fought against. The dragon soul consumed the human mind, slowly and inevitably, until what remained was a creature of power wearing the mask of heroism. If Miraak, the strongest dragonborn ever known, the hero of the Dragon War, the man who faced down Alduin himself, could not resist this corruption, then how can any dragonborn, how could the last dragonborn, thrust suddenly into power without decades of training and philosophical grounding, hope to fare better? In your timeline, Miraak fell quickly to Hermaeus Mora's corruption. He became the villain, the antagonist, the traitor. His fall was dramatic and obvious, a cautionary tale written in bold letters for all to see. And perhaps that was necessary. Perhaps his early corruption served as a warning to every dragonborn who came after. A sign that read, "This is what happens when you pursue power for its own sake. This is the price of dealing with Daedric Princes. This is the fate that awaits those who forget their humanity." But here, in this timeline, where Miraak remained pure, where he fought against corruption every single day and won, the lesson is so much darker, because it whispers, corruption is inevitable, resistance is temporary, the dragon always wins in the end. I descended deeper into the temple earlier today, following passages that do not exist in your timeline. There are levels beneath levels here, training chambers where Miraak taught his students, meditation rooms where he wrestled with his nature, libraries where he collected knowledge about the Dragonborn that existed nowhere else. And, at the very bottom, sealed behind a door that took me hours to open, I found his private sanctum. The room is small, almost claustrophobic. The walls are covered in writing, Miraak's own hand, scrawled directly onto the stone in charcoal. It is not organized, not coherent. It reads like the fevered dreams of a man slowly losing his mind. Dragon words mixed with Nordic, prayers to Akatosh mixed with curses, philosophical treatises devolving into single words repeated hundreds of times. Dominance, hunger, truth, power. And in the center of the room, carved into the floor, is a perfect replica of the symbol that appears on the cover of every black book, the Mark of Hermaeus Mora. Miraak carved it himself, I think, perhaps as an act of defiance, claiming the symbol of his tempter and containing it within his sanctum where it could harm no one. Or perhaps as an act of worship, paying homage to the one being who truly understood what he was becoming. I cannot tell. The distinction has become meaningless. I sat in that room for 3 hours, reading the walls, trying to understand how Miraak lived with himself, how he woke up every morning knowing that he was slowly transforming into the thing he hated, how he continued to fight when he had to have known, that the fight was already lost. And I realized something that makes me want to weep. He did not resist corruption to save himself. He resisted to buy time. Every day he remained uncorrupted was another day that the world did not have to face what an evil Dragonborn could do. Every year he maintained his humanity was another year of peace for Skyrim. He was not fighting to win. He was fighting to delay the inevitable for as long as possible. Miraak was not a hero in spite of his corruption. He was a hero because he knew he was doomed to corruption and fought it anyway for 73 years until his body gave out and he could finally rest. And that is somehow more tragic than anything that happened in your timeline. If this story has kept you listening this far and you want more of these dark confessions from Skyrim, hit that subscribe button. It tells me someone out there is still paying attention to warnings like these. I am leaving the sanctum now, climbing back toward the surface where the air does not taste like despair and ancient regret. But I cannot escape the question that Miraak's life poses. In your timeline, his early fall to Hermaeus Mora was a warning that saved countless lives. The last Dragonborn knows his story, knows the price of Daedric bargains, knows to be wary of the corrupting influence of power. Miraak's betrayal, as horrible as it was, served a purpose. But here, his heroism taught nothing except that resistance is futile, that even the strongest, most virtuous Dragonborn will eventually succumb to their nature, that the gift of Akatosh is also a curse that cannot be broken. Which timeline is worse? The one where Miraak fell quickly and his corruption was contained, ended, made into a cautionary tale? Or this one, where he remained heroic and proved that heroism itself is not enough to save a Dragonborn from their fate? I do not know. And the not knowing is what finally breaks me. I have reached the surface again. The twin moons of Masser and Secunda are rising over Solstheim, painting the snow in shades of blue and silver. The temple stands proud and whole behind me, a monument to a hero rather than a ruin marking a traitor's fall. Everything here is better than in your timeline, objectively better, measurably better, except for one thing. In your timeline, there is hope. The last Dragonborn can defeat Miraak and break free of Hermaeus Mora's service. They can choose differently. They can prove that Dragonborn are not doomed to corruption, that free will exists, that the future is not written. But here, I found something in Miraak's belongings that has shattered everything I thought I understood. It is a letter, sealed with wax, that has not degraded despite the centuries, preserved by some enchantment I cannot identify. The letter is addressed to the next Dragonborn, and I realize with cold certainty that Miraak knew. He knew there would be others. He knew his resistance was not a solution, merely a delay. And he left instructions. My hands shake as I break the seal. The wax crumbles like ash. The paper inside is yellowed but intact, covered in Miraak's careful script. I read it by moonlight, standing in the ruins of the temple that should have been destroyed but wasn't, and with each word, the weight of what he tried to do settles on my shoulders like a cloak made of lead. To whoever reads this, the letter begins. You are Dragonborn. You know it by now, have felt the dragon soul within you stirring, hungry, demanding. You have perhaps already killed your first dragon, felt the rush of power as its knowledge poured into you, experienced that moment of terrible clarity when you understood what you are capable of. I write to you from the other side of that revelation, from 70 years after my first dragon kill, and I need you to understand what awaits you. The dragons were right. Power is truth. The strong do have the right to rule. These are not philosophies or beliefs. They are fundamental laws of existence, as immutable as gravity, as inevitable as death. I have spent my entire life fighting this truth, and I have failed, not because I was weak, but because the truth cannot be defeated by will alone. You cannot choose to disbelieve in gravity, no matter how desperately you wish to fly. I resisted Hermaeus Mora. I refused his black book. I thought that was the corruption I needed to fear, the obvious external threat, but the real corruption was always inside me, encoded in the dragon soul that Akatosh placed in my mortal flesh. Every dragon I killed made me more like them. Every soul I consumed fed the hunger. Every year I spent in a position of unchallenged authority eroded my humanity like water eroding stone. By the time you read this, I will be dead. I have arranged for this letter to be placed where only a Dragonborn could find it, sealed with a ward that responds to dragon blood. And I write to tell you something that no one else will. You cannot win. The corruption is not something that happens to you. It is what you are. The dragon soul is the corruption, and you cannot separate yourself from your own soul. I stop reading. The moon has climbed higher, and in its light, I can see other structures scattered across Solstheim that do not exist in my timeline. Towers where Miraak students once trained, monuments to his victories, shrines where the common people once prayed for his protection, all of it abandoned now, decades or perhaps centuries after his death. The hero's legacy slowly being reclaimed by snow and wind and time. I force myself to continue reading, but here is what I have learned in 73 years of fighting the inevitable. Delay matters. Every day you remain uncorrupted is a day the world does not burn. Every year you hold on to your humanity is a year that children grow up in peace. You will not save yourself. You cannot, but you can save others for a time by bearing this burden with grace rather than surrendering to it with relief. Hermaeus Mora will come for you. Perhaps not today, perhaps not for decades, but he will come. The demon of knowledge has eternity to wait, and we, Dragonborn, are his favorite prey. We hunger for power, for understanding, for secrets, and he has an infinite supply of all three. When he comes, when he offers you the same bargains he offered me, you will want to accept. The temptation will be overwhelming, because part of you, the dragon part, will recognize the offer for what it truly is. Permission to stop fighting. Permission to become what you already are. Refuse him anyway. Not because refusal will save you, but because every refusal buys time. Make him work for your corruption. Make him wait, die of old age if you can, having never given him the satisfaction of your willing service. It will not redeem you. You are beyond redemption the moment you devour your first dragon soul, but it will matter to those who come after, who need to believe that resistance is possible even when it is not. The letter continues for several more pages, detailing strategies for maintaining humanity, techniques for resisting the dragon hunger, philosophical frameworks for making ethical decisions when your instincts scream for domination. It is a manual for fighting a losing battle, written by a man who spent his entire life on the front lines of that war. And at the very end, in script that becomes increasingly shaky, increasingly desperate, Miraak writes, "I have one final confession, something I have told no one, something I barely admit to myself. Sometimes, in the dark hours before dawn, I wonder if Hermaeus Mora did me a kindness by offering his bargain so early. If I had accepted it at the beginning, my fall would have been swift and dramatic. I would have become the villain, the cautionary tale, the warning carved in stone for every Dragonborn who came after. My corruption would have served a purpose. Instead, I resisted. I remained pure. And in doing so, I proved only that purity is not enough, that heroism is not enough, that even the strongest will cannot overcome what we are. I have provided no hope, only despair dressed in the clothes of virtue. If there is a Dragonborn reading this decades or centuries hence, I want you to know my greatest fear is not that I will be forgotten, but that I will be remembered as the Dragonborn who proved that fighting is pointless. But fight anyway, please, because the alternative is surrendering without resistance, and that is worse than any corruption. To know you are doomed and to fight regardless is the only nobility left to creatures like us." The letter ends there, unsigned, as if Miraak could not bring himself to put his name to such hopelessness. I fold it carefully and tuck it inside my cloak, feeling its weight as both a burden and a strange comfort. At least, I am not the first to grapple with these questions. At least I am not alone in my despair. I turn away from the temple and begin walking across Solstheim toward the shore where the island meets the mainland. In your timeline, this journey would be impossible. Solstheim was torn from Skyrim by the battle between Miraak and Valak, separated by miles of treacherous sea. But here, the land is unbroken. I can walk from the island back to the continent without ever getting my feet wet. It should feel like progress, like proof that this timeline is better, but instead, it feels like a lie. The land is whole, but the truth is shattered. As I walk, I think about the last Dragonborn in your timeline, the hero who defeats Alduin, who saves the world, who stands at the summit of Apocrypha and faces Miraak in battle. When Hermaeus Mora betrays Miraak and offers the last Dragonborn the position of his new champion, what does the last Dragonborn do? The game gives you no choice. You defeat Miraak, absorb his soul, and walk away from Apocrypha, but you take the knowledge with you. The Black Books remain accessible, their powers available whenever you choose to use them. You have defeated Hermaeus Mora's previous champion, but you have also proven yourself worthy to be the next one. The Demon of Knowledge has not lost, he has simply upgraded. And perhaps that was always the plan. Perhaps Miraak, in your timeline, was never meant to return to Tamriel. He was meant to be the test, the trial, the challenge that would prove the last Dragonborn worthy of Hermaeus Mora's true attention. His corruption, his thousands of years trapped in Apocrypha, his eventual defeat, all of it was just the audition process for finding a better servant. If that is true, then Miraak's early fall was not a warning, it was preparation. And the last Dragonborn, having consumed his soul, having walked through Apocrypha and survived, having proven their power by defeating the first Dragonborn himself, is exactly where Hermaeus Mora wanted them all along. I have reached the mainland now. The land beneath my feet is Skyrim proper, unchanged by the absence of Solstheim's violent separation. Ahead of me, I can see the lights of a small fishing village, people going about their lives, unaware that I have just crossed from one timeline into another, carrying knowledge that could shatter their understanding of heroism itself. What do I tell them? That their greatest hero, the Dragonborn who saved them from the World Eater, was slowly transforming into a tyrant the entire time, that every dragon he killed brought him one step closer to becoming the thing he fought against, that his virtue was not a triumph but a tragedy, a slow-motion fall from grace that took decades to complete but was never in doubt. I cannot. They need their heroes. They need to believe that good can triumph over evil, that free will exists, that the future is not written in dragon blood and Daedric contracts. To tell them otherwise would be cruel, stripping away the illusions that make mortal life bearable. But I can tell you, whoever you are, listening to this confession, this testimony, this warning, you deserve the truth, even if the truth offers no comfort. In your timeline, Miraak is the villain. He betrayed the ancient Nord heroes when they needed him most. He made a pact with Hermaeus Mora and spent thousands of years trapped in Apocrypha, growing more twisted and power-hungry with each passing century. When he finally returned, he had to be stopped by the last Dragonborn, defeated at the summit of Apocrypha in a battle that ended with Hermaeus Mora himself betraying his champion. It is a clear story, good versus evil, hero versus villain. The last Dragonborn overcomes the first Dragonborn and saves the world. Simple, satisfying, complete. But here, in this timeline where Miraak resisted, where he remained heroic, where he fought against his nature for 73 years, the story is murkier. He was both hero and victim, savior and cautionary tale, the man who proved that even perfect resistance eventually fails. His life was not a triumph, it was a delaying action, a strategic retreat, a desperate attempt to buy time for a world that could not save him and that he could not fully save in return. Which story is true? Both. Neither. The timelines blur and overlap, and I am no longer certain which version of Miraak actually existed and which is the dream of a universe trying different solutions to the same impossible problem. What do you do with a weapon that will inevitably turn on its wielder? I have walked for hours now, and dawn is breaking over the mountains. The sky bleeds red and gold, and I am reminded of dragonfire, of the Thu'um that tears reality apart, of the price we pay for power we never asked for but cannot refuse. I stop at a crossroads, literally and figuratively. Behind me lies Solstheim, whole and connected to the mainland, a monument to a timeline where Miraak resisted corruption. Ahead lies the rest of Skyrim, the familiar landscape of your timeline, where Miraak fell early and dramatically and served as a warning to every Dragonborn who came after. And I realize that I have been asking the wrong question all along. It does not matter which timeline is better. It does not matter whether Miraak's early corruption was mercy or tragedy, because both timelines lead to the same destination. The Dragonborn, whether first or last, whether hero or villain, whether corrupted early or resisting until the end, always faces the same fundamental truth. You are a weapon designed to fight dragons, forged from dragon soul and mortal flesh, and weapons do not have the luxury of choosing whether to cut. The question is not whether corruption is inevitable. The question is what you do in the time before corruption claims you completely. Miraak, in this timeline, chose to fight. For 73 years, he woke up every morning knowing he was slowly transforming into a monster, and every morning he chose to be human anyway. That is not a victory in any conventional sense, but it is also not meaningless. 73 years of peace, 73 years where children grew up without fearing dragons, 73 years where the Thu'um was taught as a tool for protection rather than domination, 73 years of borrowed time, purchased with constant vigilance and endless internal struggle. Was it worth it? I do not know. Ask the children who grew up in those 73 years of peace. Ask the students who learned the way of the voice from a master who, despite his inner corruption, taught them to value restraint. Ask the dragons who were given quick deaths by a dragonborn who understood what they were but killed them with respect rather than cruelty. They might say yes. They might say that 73 years of imperfect heroism is worth more than a lifetime of dramatic villainy, that Miraak's slow fall was preferable to his fast one, that the man who fights knowing he cannot win is more admirable than the man who surrenders at the first offer of power. Or they might say no. They might say that a clear villain is better than a compromised hero, that Miraak's example in this timeline taught only despair, that his 73-year battle was ultimately pointless because the end result was the same, that he should have accepted his nature from the beginning and spared himself the decades of futile struggle. I cannot tell them which is correct. I can only tell them what I have seen. I have walked through two timelines, compared the Dragonborn who fell early to the Dragonborn who resisted until the end, and I have learned that the distinction does not matter as much as we would like to believe. The first Dragonborn in your timeline, or this one, is doomed. The last Dragonborn, regardless of their choices, will eventually face the same tests, the same temptations, the same slow erosion of humanity beneath the weight of dragon souls. But perhaps that is not the tragedy we think it is. Perhaps the point of being Dragonborn is not to win. Perhaps it is to buy time, to stand between the dragons and humanity, knowing you will eventually become more dragon than human, but standing there anyway because the alternative is to let the dragons win immediately. Perhaps every Dragonborn is a sacrifice, a mortal who burns themselves out, fighting an unwinnable war so that others might live in peace for a few more years. If that is true, then Miraak, in both timelines, succeeded. In your timeline, his dramatic fall provided a warning that saved the last Dragonborn from making the same mistakes. In this timeline, his prolonged resistance provided 73 years of relative peace. Both versions of Miraak sacrificed themselves, one quickly and one slowly, and both sacrifices mattered. The sun has fully risen now, and I am standing at the crossroads between timelines, between heroism and villainy, between hope and despair, and I make my choice. I choose to believe that Miraak's resistance mattered, not because it saved him, but because it proved that resistance is possible at all. I choose to believe that the last Dragonborn, faced with the same temptations, the same slow corruption, the same inevitable transformation from hero to tyrant, will also choose to resist. Not because resistance guarantees victory, but because the choice to fight, even when fighting is hopeless, is the only thing that separates us from the monsters we fear becoming. I choose to believe that every day of resistance matters, every dragon killed with honor rather than cruelty, every decision made from morality rather than expedience, every moment of choosing humanity over the dragon hunger. These things do not prevent the corruption, but they delay it, and delay is all we have. Delay is victory when measured in mortal lifetimes. Delay is heroism when the alternative is immediate surrender. I choose to believe that Miraak was a hero in both timelines, in all timelines, not because he won, but because he fought. And I choose to honor his memory, not by mourning his inevitable corruption, but by recognizing the 73 years, or the decades, or the mere moments of resistance that he managed to achieve before the dragon's soul finally consumed him, because that is all any of us can do. Resist for as long as we can. Fight the inevitable with everything we have. Buy time for those who come after, even if we cannot save ourselves. And hope that our resistance, however temporary, however doomed, matters to someone, somewhere, in some timeline. The first Dragonborn's greatest power was the choice he never made in your timeline, to serve darkness immediately. But his greatest power in this timeline was the choice he made every single day for 73 years, to be human, despite the dragon's soul screaming for dominance within him. Both choices mattered. Both timelines needed the version of Miraak they received, and perhaps that is the answer to the question that has haunted me since I first entered that temple and saw the murals of the hero who never fell. There is no better timeline. There is only the one we inhabit, and our responsibility to resist corruption for as long as we can, regardless of whether resistance changes our ultimate fate. I turn away from the crossroads and continue walking into Skyrim, carrying Miraak's letter in my cloak and his truth in my heart. The corruption was always waiting. The corruption will always win, eventually. But between now and eventually lies all of human history, all of mortal achievement, all of the love and struggle and sacrifice that makes life worth living, even when you know how it ends. Miraak bought 73 years of that. In your timeline, the last Dragonborn might buy more or less. It does not matter. What matters is that they fight, that you fight if you are Dragonborn, that we all fight in whatever ways we can against the corruption that wants to transform us into monsters. Because the alternative is to surrender, and surrender, as Miraak wrote in his final letter, is worse than any corruption. The sun is warm on my face, the air smells of pine and snow. Ahead of me, Skyrim stretches endlessly, full of dangers and wonders, full of people who need heroes even if those heroes are doomed. And I walk toward them, carrying the knowledge that heroism is not victory. Heroism is the choice to fight anyway. That is Miraak's legacy, in both timelines, in all possible worlds. The first Dragonborn who taught us that resistance matters, even when resistance cannot save us, especially when resistance cannot save us. I am done with my confession now. I have told you what I found in the temple that should not exist. In the timeline where Miraak resisted, I have shared the letter he left for the next Dragonborn, the truth he discovered after 73 years of fighting his own nature. I have walked the path between two versions of history and found that both lead to the same place, but the journey matters more than the destination. If you take nothing else from this testimony, take this. You are not alone in your struggle. Whatever corruptions you face, whatever transformations threaten to steal your humanity, others have fought the same battles before you. They did not win, but they fought, and their fighting mattered, and your fighting will matter too. The dragon's soul is the corruption, but the human will is the resistance, and as long as we choose to resist, As long as we fight against what we are becoming for even one more day, we are human. We are more than our nature. We are the choice to be better than our nature, for as long as we can. Sustain that choice. Miraak sustained it for 73 years. How long can you sustain it? That is the only question that matters. That is the only question any of us can answer. And I walk into the dawn toward whatever fate awaits, choosing resistance with every step,